Hey, this is Tony from the Cold Case Project, where we focus on unsolved cases across the United States. Our mission is to bring attention to these unresolved mysteries that need your help. All the information we cover in these cases is readily available on the internet, but we rewrite and repurpose it for the purpose of these videos. Our goal is to spread the word about the thousands of unsolved cold cases still out there. Thank you for watching. If you want to help shed light on these cases, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Your support can make a difference.
On October 20th, 2000, in Long Beach, California, 27-year-old Diana ROH has, in the midst of a contentious divorce, vanished without a trace from her apartment. The last person to see her was her boyfriend, who left her asleep on her sofa in the early hours of the morning. When she failed to report for work, a deeper mystery began to unfold, revealing a history of fear, a missing truck, and a family's desperate search for answers. Her estranged husband, a restraining order, and unsettling discoveries in her apartment paint a chilling picture of what might have happened. Diana's family and friends paint a picture of a woman living in fear of her estranged husband, Americo, even having a restraining order against him. What happened to Diana? Was she a victim of a forced disappearance? Or did something else entirely lead to her vanishing? After nearly 25 years, her case remains unsolved. Our story begins in Long Beach, California. Our subject is 27-year-old Diana, resided in an apartment in the 5500 block of Ackerfield Avenue. At the time, she was in the midst of divorcing her husband, Americo, who, perhaps uncomfortably, lived in the same apartment complex just across the courtyard. On October 19th, 2000, Diana dropped off their 2-year-old daughter at Americo's residence for a court-ordered visitation. She then returned to her own apartment with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend departed between 12:15 and 12:30 a.m. on October 20th, locking the door behind him. He told authorities that Diana was asleep on her sofa at the time he left her home. She has never been heard from again. Diana had a job at a church in 2000. Her boyfriend was the pastor's son. She failed to report to work on the morning of October 20th. Her boyfriend attempted to call her at approximately 9 a.m., but she wasn't at home. Her black 1992 Nissan extra cab pickup truck was also missing from the complex's parking lot. The vehicle had distinct features: white pinstripes, a missing driver's side door lock, and a missing radio. Its Texas license plate number was BY3242. After her boyfriend reported her missing, police searched Diana's apartment and found a small amount of blood on the couch and a bandana soaked in what they believe was urine. There were no indications of forced entry. According to her family and friends, Diana was extremely afraid of Americo and had told people he had broken her arm on one occasion. Her co-workers stated that her husband called her at work from time to time, and they would have screaming arguments. She had gotten a restraining order against him a few months prior to her disappearance, stating in the application that he had stalked her and assaulted her, and that she was afraid for her life and their daughters. According to police, they questioned numerous persons of interest in Diana's case, including her boyfriend as well as Americo. Initially, all of them turned out to have alibis. Americo's alibi witness was his sister, whom he shared his apartment with. However, investigators later stated they could no longer confirm that alibi. Furthermore, a friend of Americo's told police that Americo had said Diana would never be found. Adding to the family's suspicions, Diana's family claimed Americo attempted to take out a $300,000 insurance policy on her life after her disappearance. Diana's family members strongly suspect that foul play was involved in her disappearance. She had been fighting for full custody of her daughter, and her loved one said it would be uncharacteristic of her to abandon the child she was fighting so hard to protect. Tragically, Diana's family hasn't seen her daughter since she disappeared. Americo raised her and reportedly cut off all contact with the child's mother's relatives. An anonymous tipster told police that Diana's body was buried outside of Ridgecrest, California. However, a subsequent search of the surrounding Mojave Desert turned up no indication of Diana's body or her truck, which has also never been found. There have not been any arrests in connection with Diana's. On January 1st, 1980, in the quiet town of Applegate, California, 14-year-old Alma Root was seen for the last time. Having endured a difficult childhood alongside her older sister, Laura, their recent reunion living with their grandmother was a hopeful new chapter. That evening, Alma's 25-year-old boyfriend, Scott Petschek, picked her up. According to Petschek, he later dropped her off at an aunt's house in a distant town, a claim her family immediately refuted. Alma, who had a history of running away from difficult circumstances, was initially classified as a runaway. But for her sister Laura, who knew Alma better than anyone, a chilling suspicion took root. Alma would never have left without her. Alma's childhood was marked by severe challenges. She and her older sister, Laura Huff, spent several years in foster care, a direct consequence of running away from home to escape abuse. Their father was convicted for these horrific acts and was still in prison when Alma vanished. These shared traumas forged an incredibly strong bond between the sisters, even when they were placed in separate foster homes. Just before Alma disappeared, she and Laura were finally reunited and went to live with their grandmother in Applegate, California. This was a chance for stability, a fresh start. But that hope was shattered on New Year's Day, 1980, when Alma seemingly evaporated after being with her boyfriend, Scott Petschek. Was Alma simply reverting to old habits, or was something far more sinister at play? The conflicting stories, the boyfriend's later criminal history, and the family's unwavering belief that Alma would never abandon them, especially her sister, make this a truly heartbreaking and unsettling mystery. Our story begins with the challenging early lives of Alma Root and her older sister, Laura Huff. For several years leading up to 1980, the two girls were in the foster care system. This was not due to a lack of family, but a desperate act of self-preservation. They had run away from home to escape severe abuse. Their third sister had already moved out of the household by this point. Following their brave actions, Alma's father was convicted of abusing both Alma and Laura. He was sentenced to prison and was, in fact, still incarcerated at the time of Alma's disappearance. Despite being placed in separate foster homes at times, Alma and Laura remained incredibly close, a bond forged in shared trauma and resilience. Shortly before Alma went missing, a moment of hopeful reunion occurred. The two sisters were finally together again, going to live with their grandmother in Applegate, California. It was a chance for a semblance of a normal, stable life. However, this hopeful period was tragically cut short. Alma was last seen on January 1st, 1980. That evening, her 25-year-old boyfriend, Scott Petschek, picked her up from her grandmother's residence. According to Petschek's account, he and Alma spent some time at his grandmother's home. Then, Alma purportedly asked him to drive her to her aunt's home in Rio Linda, California. Petschek stated he dropped her off at this requested destination, then went to his job at McClellan Air Force Base. After work, when he returned to Rio Linda to pick up Alma, she was gone. Petschek informed authorities that he did not consider her disappearance unusual. He explained that Alma had a reputation as an occasional runaway and hitchhiker, suggesting that she had simply taken off on her own. However, Alma's family immediately told investigators a crucial detail. Alma did not have an aunt who lived in Rio Linda. This directly contradicted Petschek's story. It was also suggested that she may have traveled with a male companion after her initial disappearance. Due to Alma's past history as a runaway, initial police belief leaned towards the idea that Alma had left of her own accord in 1980. From the very beginning, however, Laura Huff, Alma's sister, vehemently believed this was not the case. Laura stated that the two of them had always run away together, and Alma would never have left without her. Laura claims that when she pressed Petschek about what happened, he chillingly told her she would never find Alma. The case of Alma Root remained largely dormant for over a decade. Then, in 1991, a significant development occurred. Alma's father was released from prison. He immediately went to the police and asked if they had located his daughter, prompting the case to be reopened. Authorities re-interviewed Scott Petschek, attempting to gain fresh insights. As part of this renewed investigation, they even searched the well behind Petschek's grandmother's home, presumably looking for any evidence of Alma. But unfortunately, they found nothing of interest. Interestingly, sometime after 1980, Scott Petschek was convicted of a crime involving a child. He is now registered as a S offender. Despite this disturbing criminal record, he has never been charged in Alma's disappearance and continues to maintain his innocence in her vanishing. Little conclusive information is available as to Alma's ultimate fate. Her grandparents and father have since passed away, but her mother and two sisters, including Laura, are still alive, carrying the burden of her unsolved disappearance. Alma's family suspicions remain strong. Her difficult childhood, marked by abuse and instability, was a powerful reason for her to stay close to her sister and grandmother. The idea that she would simply vanish without a word, especially when she had just found some semblance of stability, feels deeply inconsistent to those who knew her best. The immediate contradictions in Petschek's story, coupled with his later conviction for child abuse, cast a dark shadow over his account of that night. The tragic reality is that Alma Root's case remains unsolved. Some agencies still classify it as a runaway, but for her sister Laura and others who look closely at the details, Alma's disappearance feels far more sinister, an unanswered farewell shrouded in the silence of time. The disappearance of Alma Root is a heartbreaking example of how a victim's past, particularly one marked by instability, can unfortunately influence how their case is initially perceived. Alma's history as a runaway, born from a necessity of escaping abuse, became a lens through which law enforcement initially viewed her disappearance. This may have prevented the immediate, aggressive investigation that might have uncovered crucial evidence in the critical early hours and days. Laura's unwavering conviction that Alma would not have left without her is incredibly powerful. When families express such certainty about a loved one's character and actions, it should always be given significant weight. The bond between these two sisters, forged in trauma, was unique. Laura knew Alma's patterns, her fears, and her loyalties better than anyone. Her immediate dismissal of the runaway theory speaks volumes. Then we have Scott Petschek. His shifting story about the aunt in Rio Linda and his later conviction are red flags that cannot be ignored. While his past crime does not automatically make him responsible for Alma's disappearance, it certainly places him under intense scrutiny as the last person known to have been with her. His alleged statement to Laura, "You would never find Alma," is chilling and, if true, highly incriminating. The search of the well behind his grandmother's home years later, after the case was reopened, indicates that authorities did, at some point, consider a more sinister possibility. However, without any physical evidence to tie him directly to foul play, and in the absence of Alma's body or any other definitive trace, the case remains cold. The tragedy of Alma Root's story is multifaceted: a childhood stolen by abuse, a brief moment of reunion and hope, and then a mysterious vanishing that has left her family, particularly her sister, in perpetual anguish. After 45 years, the question remains, what truly happened to Alma Root after she was picked up by Scott Petschek on New Year's Day, 1980? We can only hope that one day, the truth will surface and Alma's family can finally find peace. On February 1st, 1998, a picturesque afternoon at Stump Beach in Sonoma County, California, turned into an enduring mystery. 20-year-old Jason Rawl and his 18-year-old girlfriend, Rachel Rhodes, embarked on a seemingly innocent outing to explore tide pools. They were expected home by early evening, but they never returned. Their car was found, personal items undisturbed inside, yet a 3-day search of the vast ocean yielded no trace. To this day, the bodies of these two promising young students have never been found, leaving their families with questions and an unimaginable void. This is a story of two young individuals, deeply in love and with their futures brightly laid out before them, who simply vanished from a beautiful stretch of California coastline. Jason, studying biology and chemistry with dreams of medical research, and Rachel, enrolled in nursing, had been a couple for 2 years. Their outing to Stump Beach was meant to be a simple afternoon enjoying nature. Yet, despite the presence of their car and no signs of struggle or foul play on land, they disappeared without a trace. While the official belief is that they were swept out to sea and drowned, the complete absence of any physical remains has left a lingering, quiet uncertainty for their loved ones. What truly happened that day at Stump Beach? Could there be another explanation beyond the powerful, unpredictable waves? Our story begins in Sonoma County, California, on February 1st, 1998. Our subjects are 20-year-old Jason Rawl and his 18-year-old girlfriend, Rachel Rhodes. Jason was a Petaluma native, living there with his parents and older brother. Both he and Rachel were students at Santa Rosa Junior College and had been dating for about 2 years. On that fateful day, Jason and Rachel decided to spend the afternoon at Stump Beach, a scenic, rugged stretch of coastline known for its beautiful tide pools at low tide. Their plan was to explore these natural wonders, a common and seemingly safe activity. They were expected to return home by early evening. However, as the hours passed, they did not arrive. Their families, growing increasingly concerned, reported them missing the next day. The search began. Jason's red Mazda was soon located in the beach parking lot at Stump Beach. Inside the vehicle, authorities found personal items, suggesting a quick departure or that they hadn't planned to be gone long. There were no signs of a struggle within the car or around it. Given the location and the circumstances, authorities quickly formed a theory. They believed the couple was swept out to sea and drowned. The Pacific coastline, particularly areas with tide pools, can be deceptively dangerous. Rogue waves, strong undertows, and sudden swells are not uncommon. A comprehensive 3-day search operation was immediately launched, involving the Coast Guard and local search and rescue teams. They meticulously scoured the ocean waters and the rugged coastline around Stump Beach. However, despite these extensive efforts, no sign of Jason, Rachel, or their bodies was ever found. The vastness of the ocean, combined with strong currents, can make recovery extremely difficult, sometimes impossible, in such tragedies. A month after their disappearance, with no remains discovered and no further clues emerging, their heartbroken families held memorial services for Jason and Rachel. It was a difficult decision, a way to find some closure in the absence of a definitive end to their story. Jason Rawl was a dedicated student, pursuing biology and chemistry, with aspirations for a career in medical research. He was planning a transfer to California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo in the fall. Rachel Rhodes was also focused on her future, enrolled in the nursing program, preparing for a career of caring for others. Both had bright, promising lives ahead of them. Their disappearance remains officially attributed to a tragic accident at sea. The lack of their bodies, while common in ocean drownings, leaves a lingering sense of unease for some. There's no evidence to suggest foul play or that they vanished intentionally, unlike other cases where financial troubles or personal conflicts were at play. This was, on the surface, an ordinary day that turned into an extraordinary loss. To this day, the Pacific Ocean holds the ultimate secret of what truly happened to Jason Rawl and Rachel Rhodes. Their bodies have never been recovered. On paper, this is a straightforward case of accidental drowning at sea. The ocean is vast, currents are strong, and it's not uncommon for victims of such incidents to never be recovered. For the families, holding a memorial service in the absence of remains is often the only path to a form of closure, a way to grieve and acknowledge the loss even without a physical burial. However, the complete and utter lack of any trace, no clothing, no personal items washed ashore, no fragment of a body, can be haunting. While entirely plausible given the environment, it still leaves a tiny, gnawing what if. Could something else, something unseen, have occurred? In early 1999, during holiday leave from United States military training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, 21-year-old Boaz Zeno embarked on a journey that would lead to his complete disappearance. He was last seen aboard a bus in Oakland, California, on January 3rd, planning to travel to San Francisco. But it's unclear if he ever reached his destination. Boaz, a young man grappling with mental illness, who had secretly enlisted in the Army, has never been heard from again. What became of the intelligent, yet troubled, former Dean's List student who seemed to admire the very streets he might have ended up on? Boaz Zeno's story is not a straightforward one. He was a bright student who, for reasons unknown, left college to join a circus, then re-enrolled only to struggle. A period spent in Israel saw a dramatic shift in his behavior, alarming his mother to the point she flew across the world to intervene. Diagnosed with a psychiatric illness, he received treatment, but tragically, he later stopped his medication and eventually disappeared after secretly enlisting in the Army. His last known movements involved a bus ride to California and a change of plans. Was this a return to his past fascination with a transient lifestyle, or did something more sinister befall him? The contrasting initial police theories and the private detective's findings highlight the challenges in understanding Boaz's final steps. Our story begins with Boaz Zeno, a young man with a complex past. Prior to his disappearance, he had been a student at the State University of New York, SUNY, at Albany. Initially, he was a Dean's List student, a testament to his intelligence and academic ability. However, at some point, he unexpectedly dropped out of college to take part in the circus, a move that hinted at a desire for unconventional experiences or perhaps an early sign of inner turmoil. Later on, he re-enrolled at SUNY, but did not finish the term, receiving incompletes in all his classes. This marked a clear decline in his academic performance. Following his academic struggles, Boaz traveled to Israel and spent a few months at a yeshiva, a Jewish religious school. However, he soon dropped out of the yeshiva and went to live with his grandmother in Tel Aviv. It was during this period in Israel that Boaz's behavior changed dramatically and alarmingly. He sounded so disturbed during a telephone conversation with his mother back in the United States that she immediately flew to Tel Aviv to be with him and insisted he seek psychiatric attention. Boaz was subsequently prescribed the antipsychotic medication Risperdal and was placed in a religious group home for the mentally ill. His condition reportedly improved while on medication and in the structured environment of the group home. However, a few months after his mother returned home to the United States, Boaz left the group home and, critically, stopped taking his medication. A few months after this, Boaz and his father also traveled to the United States. A month after his arrival, Boaz was hospitalized again for his mental illness and was prescribed a different medication, Zyprexa. After he was discharged from the hospital, Boaz Zeno made a significant and unexpected decision. He joined the United States Army. Crucially, he did not disclose his psychiatric illness, his previous hospitalizations, or the medication he was taking to the Army. He enlisted on November 30th, 1998. Boaz last spoke to his family on the telephone a few weeks later. He sounded upbeat during the conversation and told them he was going to visit relatives in Oakland, California, during his holiday leave from military training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. However, when his bus arrived in Oakland on January 3rd, 1999, Boaz saw two other enlisted men off and then, unexpectedly, told them he was going to San Francisco instead. It is unclear if he ever arrived at his stated destination of San Francisco. Boaz has never been heard from again. Several weeks later, the Army notified Zeno's family that he had never returned to Fort Sill for active duty as scheduled, confirming his disappearance. In 2001, Boaz Zeno's mother hired a private detective to look for her son. The detective believed Boaz was possibly homeless. Prior to his disappearance, Boaz had reportedly expressed admiration for homeless people and their resourcefulness, which, in retrospect, takes on a chilling new context. Witnesses reported seeing a man strongly resembling Boaz living on the streets and in homeless shelters in the Oakland and Berkeley, California areas. However, Despite these potential sightings, the private detective was never able to definitively locate him. Both Oklahoma and California authorities are handling Zeno's case, which remains unsolved. The layers of his personal struggles, his hidden military enlistment, and the fragmented nature of his last known movements make his disappearance a particularly difficult one to unravel. The disappearance of Boaz Zeno is a profoundly tragic case that underscores the complexities of mental illness and the challenges faced by families trying to support loved ones navigating these struggles. Boaz was clearly a talented individual, evidenced by his Dean's List status, but his path veered dramatically, leading him away from conventional expectations and into a period of acute mental health crisis. His mother's courageous act of flying to Israel to get him help and his initial improvement on medication paint a picture of hope. However, his decision to stop taking his medication and then, crucially, to hide his psychiatric history from the Army are heartbreaking turns that likely contributed to his vulnerability. The Army, unaware of his past, could not provide the support he might have needed, putting him in a potentially precarious situation, especially during a period of transition like holiday leave. The unconfirmed sightings of Boaz resembling a homeless individual are particularly poignant, given his reported admiration for the resourcefulness of those living on the streets. This raises the agonizing question for his family. Did he intentionally seek out a nomadic, unhoused existence, or did his illness, coupled with his vulnerabilities, lead him to a situation from which he couldn't return? The fact that his case is handled by both Oklahoma and California authorities speaks to the uncertainty of his last known trajectory. Did he make it to San Francisco? Did he ever fully disconnect from his old life by choice? Or was something else, something more sinister, at play that has kept him from being found? The absence of any definitive answers for over 2 decades leaves Boaz Zeno's family in a state of perpetual limbo. They are left to wonder what became of their intelligent, yet troubled son and brother, who was lost somewhere between his past struggles and an uncertain future. On May 9, 2013, between 11 o'clock and 11:30 p.m., in the Quartz Hill area of Lancaster, California, 33-year-old Michelle Russ was last seen at her home. Earlier that day, she had reportedly been feeling down, but by evening, she appeared to have recovered her spirits. She spoke to a relative, mentioning plans to meet some new acquaintances, a suggestion he cautioned against. She disappeared sometime after tucking her young son into bed for the night. Michelle has never been heard from again. Authorities are investigating her case as a possible homicide, believing those she knew hold the key to her fate. And with that, the trail went cold. Michelle Russ was a young mother, described by her family as easily influenced by others. She also contended with medical problems, which added to their immediate concern for her safety when she vanished without a trace. Her last known actions were those of a devoted mother, putting her son to bed. Yet, after that, she simply disappeared. Police have now reclassified her case as a possible homicide, believing that individuals within her own circle know what happened to her. Whispers in the community link her disappearance to another local woman, Monique Figueroa, who vanished 2 years later, suggesting a darker, unconfirmed connection. What truly happened to Michelle Russ in the quiet hours of that May night? Our story begins in the Quartz Hill area of Lancaster, California, on May 9, 2013. Our subject is 33-year-old Michelle Russ. She resided in her home in the 42,000 block of 51st Street West. Earlier on the day she disappeared, Michelle had reportedly been feeling depressed. However, by evening, her mood seemed to have lifted. She spoke with a relative, telling him she was going to meet some people she had encountered earlier that day. The relative, perhaps sensing something wasn't right or simply being cautious, advised her not to go. When he called later that evening, she was still at home. It was sometime between 11 o'clock and 11:30 p.m. that night, after she had tucked her young son in for the night, that Michelle Russ disappeared. She has never been heard from again. Michelle's family immediately voiced deep concerns for her safety. They described her as easily influenced by other people, a trait that made them particularly worried about her interactions with new acquaintances. Furthermore, Michelle had existing medical problems, which compounded their fears. Authorities, after their initial investigation, have indeed begun investigating Michelle Russ's case as a possible homicide. They have stated publicly that they believe people Michelle knew have information as to what happened to her. This suggests that the focus of their investigation lies within her personal network, rather than a random act of violence. Adding another layer of intrigue and concern to Michelle's disappearance are persistent rumors circulating within the community. There are unconfirmed whispers that the same individuals responsible for Michelle's disappearance might also be responsible for the vanishing and presumed murder of Monique Figueroa. Monique was another local woman who disappeared 2 years after Michelle did. While this has not been officially confirmed by law enforcement as a direct link, the shared geographic area and the similar, unexplained nature of their disappearances have naturally led to speculation and fear within the community. Both the case of Michelle Russ and Monique Figueroa remain tragically unsolved, leaving 2 families without answers and a community grappling with unsettling questions. The hope for justice for Michelle lies with those who know the truth finally coming forward. The detail that she was easily influenced by other people is particularly heartbreaking, as it suggests a vulnerability that someone may have exploited. When this trait is combined with medical problems, a person's risk factors can unfortunately increase. The shift in the police's approach to her case, from simply missing person to suspected homicide, is a critical development. It indicates that their investigation has yielded information that points away from a voluntary disappearance or an accident and squarely towards foul play. Furthermore, their belief that people she knew have information is a direct appeal, suggesting they have identified potential individuals of interest, but lack the definitive proof needed for charges. The unconfirmed rumors linking Michelle's case to that of Monique Figueroa are profoundly unsettling as well. While investigators have not confirmed a direct connection, the very existence of such speculation highlights a disturbing pattern of disappearances in the area and raises questions about a potential serial perpetrator or a shared criminal element. On June 20th, 2006, in Camarillo, California, 49-year-old Michael Rudolph vanished. A neighbor, noting his uncharacteristic absence, reported him missing. Just 3 days later, his car was found parked at a scenic but notoriously dangerous beach. Initial theories pointed to a tragic accident or suicide, but those closest to Michael strongly disagreed. As the years passed, law enforcement's perspective shifted dramatically. They now believe Michael Rudolph was murdered and his vehicle deliberately placed to throw investigators off the scent. His ambitious real estate ventures in Costa Rica and an unnamed person of interest lie at the heart of this enduring mystery. And with that, the trail went cold. Michael Rudolph, a man described as friendly and boisterous, had recently embraced a new passion for surfing and was on the cusp of a major life change. He was planning to sell his home in California and move to Costa Rica, where he was developing a promising real estate project. But on June 20th, 2006, those plans came to an abrupt, mysterious halt. His car was found at a hazardous beach, suggesting a tragic surfing accident or even suicide. But his family and friends vehemently rejected these notions, highlighting Michael's vibrant outlook and his careful avoidance of dangerous surf spots. Years later, authorities themselves would echo the family's suspicions, announcing their belief that Michael was the victim of foul play, with his own car used to mislead the investigation. What happened to Michael Rudolph? Were his ambitious ventures in Costa Rica connected to his disappearance? And who is the unnamed person of interest investigators believe is involved? Our story begins in Camarillo, California, on June 20th, 2006. Our subject is 49-year-old Michael Rudolph. Michael was a man with a zest for life, described by his family, including his 2 siblings, as friendly and boisterous. He was known for being meticulous about his whereabouts. His neighbors stated it was uncharacteristic for him to leave without warning always letting someone know when he had to go out of town. It was this very trait that raised the alarm. When Michael didn't adhere to his usual communication habits, a concerned neighbor reported him missing. Just 3 days after his disappearance, Michael's maroon 2000 Ford Contour with a license plate number 4JVD648 was discovered. It was found parked at the beach near the well-known landmark of Magoo Rock. This location immediately led police to theorize that Rudolph might have committed suicide or drowned in a surfing accident. Magoo Rock is an iconic spot, but the surf there can be treacherous. However, those closest to Michael strongly disagreed with the police's initial assessment. His loved ones stated that he wasn't depressed at the time of his disappearance. Quite the opposite. He was looking forward to new ventures. Furthermore, they emphasized that Michael would not have gone surfing in the Magoo Rock area, as he himself considered it unsafe. Adding to the mystery, bloodhounds brought to the scene couldn't track Rudolph's scent away from his vehicle, suggesting he didn't simply walk off into the surrounding area. The lack of a clear trail, combined with the family's insistence that something was amiss, eventually led authorities to reevaluate their stance. In late 2009, over 3 years after Michael vanished, authorities made a significant announcement. They now believe someone murdered him and deliberately parked his car at the beach lot to mislead the investigation. This shift in theory indicated a growing suspicion of foul play. The key to understanding Michael Rudolph's disappearance may lie in his ambitious future plans. After his divorce in 2000, Michael had become an avid surfer, and he was eagerly looking forward to surfing on Costa Rica's beautiful beaches. More than just a vacation, he had purchased a plot of land there and was deeply involved in real estate deals. His plan was to sell his Camarillo home and move to Costa Rica permanently, where he was refurbishing parts of the property he purchased and planned to sell them as condominiums. Authorities now strongly believe that these real estate deals in Costa Rica are directly connected to his disappearance. The high stakes involved in international property development can attract unsavory characters or lead to unforeseen conflicts. Investigators have even identified a person of interest in his disappearance, though they have chosen not to name this individual publicly, suggesting an ongoing and sensitive investigation. Michael Rudolph's case remains unsolved, categorized as a suspected homicide. The maroon Ford Contour at the beach, once a sign of a tragic accident, is now seen as a carefully staged element in a larger, darker story. The friendly, boisterous man, eager for new adventures, simply vanished, leaving behind a family desperate for answers and a complex web of international intrigue. The disappearance of Michael Rudolph is a compelling example of how initial theories in missing persons cases can sometimes be misdirected, particularly when a seemingly plausible explanation, like a surfing accident or suicide, is readily available. It took years for law enforcement to publicly acknowledge what Michael's family likely suspected from the start, that he was a victim of foul play. The shift in the official theory in 2009 is crucial. When investigators state they believe a car was deliberately placed to mislead them, it points to a calculated effort on the part of a perpetrator. This elevates the case from a tragic accident to a planned crime, suggesting a motive and an intentional cover-up. The focus on Michael's Costa Rica land deals provides a strong potential motive. International real estate can be a high-stakes, high-risk business, sometimes attracting individuals or entities willing to resort to extreme measures. Was Michael caught in a dispute over property? Did he uncover something illicit related to his developments? Or perhaps, was he targeted for the assets he possessed or the money he was poised to make? The existence of an unnamed person of interest suggests that investigators have a specific individual in mind, but lack the conclusive evidence needed for an arrest. This is a frustrating reality in many cold cases, knowing who might be responsible, but being unable to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Michael Rudolph, a man looking forward to a new life chapter, was cut down by unknown forces. The beaches of Costa Rica, once a symbol of his future, now stand in stark contrast to the grim reality of his disappearance from a California coastline. For his family, the hope remains that one day, The hidden truth behind the Maroon, Ford Contour, and the Costa Rican land deals will finally bring justice for Michael.